Maria Hinojosa, thank you for coming and stopping by on your national tour for this wonderful show on Need to Know, that you're discovering all these things about these United States that most people will find very surprising in this program.
The new American mainstream is
Absolutely.
what I'm calling it, the new American mainstream. And it's great to be back in New Mexico, one of my all-time favorite places in the world.
I love it. Welcome back. Let's talk about that very issue. What, in fact, is the new American mainstream as you describe it in the show?
Well, I think actually it's what we're all living. If we opened our eyes and looked around us, we would say, yeah, really the demographic change that we saw in the census numbers is part and parcel of my reality. And I'm not afraid. It doesn't make me fearful because, in fact, I see that my kids or my grandkids are playing with other, different looking kids, and it's all good. It is an understanding that instead of looking at this change of the new mainstream with fear and trepidation, it's looking at it like this is happening. It's already part of who we are, and why fear what we've already become?
It's snuck up on a lot of folks, though. It's interesting because you concentrate in an area of the country, in a very specific town in Georgia, where this could almost feel like a ground zero case for the rest of the United States. Describe what you saw there and some of the things you started to dig under the surface and really start to extricate.
Well, that's exactly what's funny about this, because you think about diversity in the United States of America and you see it happening in other parts. Certainly here in New Mexico, it's been part and parcel from the moment of creation of this spot. But who would have thought that one of the places that is most diverse by the numbers in our country is the small town just south of Atlanta, Georgia? What?
Right.
In fact, the South, the American South, is the place that has seen the most intense and highest percentage of demographic change in terms of a multicultural population. And then what we did is we looked at the entire region, and then we zeroed in at the spot where it's kind of the most intense, as you said, ground zero. I kind of say that it's like the future of America on steroids, right? In this particular case, it was 40 different countries and 60 different languages being spoken in about a mile square. Not huge, which means people have got to learn how to get along. And it's what we expect from the United States of America. It's hopeful. People cross personal boundaries in ways that is really beautiful. There's resistance to change. There's fear. There's anger. But then there is the reality that this, by the numbers, this is what our country is going to look like in the future. And so let's learn about how to do this by talking to each other and thinking of new ways of getting along. It's really inspiring.
Those numbers, I want to repeat what you just said. You're talking about 40 different cultures, 60 different languages in a small town in Georgia. That blew me away. I have to just confess. I was really quite shocked by that. And so what does that do on the ground? You have an African-American mayor, which was very interesting as well, we got to throw in there. How do folks kind of negotiate this new American dream once it's on the ground?
Well, there are many people who left. In the very beginning, when it used to be all white, 97% white and American-born, and then it started changing, having a more African-American presence, some people left. That was their reaction. Others have stayed for all kinds of reasons, and there's the working through of the fear. But what's interesting is these personal relationships. For example, one of my favorite relationships is Diane and Amina. Diane is a Republican, Christian, pro-life, Tea Party supporting Republican who decides she wants to run for city council. Her best friend in the world has been in the United States for about 5 or so years, 3 to 5 years, and they meet in church and become best friends. Amina couldn't be any more different than Diane. Amina is from Somalia, survived a massacre of her entire family, is an activist at heart, loves Obama, can't vote because she's not yet a citizen, but becomes her best friend Diane's campaign manager when she runs for city council, and gets her elected with the most votes of any candidate in the entire history. And they love each other, and they call themselves sisters. They call each other sisters, even though one loves Obama but can't vote, and the other one supports the Tea Party in the United States. That is hopeful for our democracy. And I'm not going to give away there is a punchline with Amina, but you have to watch the whole show to see that.
They were adorable. I just thought the friendship just really comes across. But in the context of all that, that especially was interesting, watching that relationship part of that Bloom. Can I quote you something from the show, as if you don't know these words? You said these words. By 2042, demographers project that we will be a multicultural majority nation. And you ask Guy Garcia, who helps you in this program, to kind of sort all this out. Should white America be afraid of becoming a minority? His answer was interesting to me. They should only be afraid of becoming a minority if that's within the old definition of what a minority means. Marginalized, left out, disenfranchised. He says a little bit more, but those are interesting ways to look at it, because we don't have to be stuck in those old things, do we?
Exactly. No. Yeah. One of the things that I've tried to do in my career is to understand, to put myself in other people's shoes and understand their pain, their fear, their concerns. Mm-hmm. So when I ask this question, really with love, as opposed to, let me throw fire and let me make this boiling and let me make people feel even more divided. No. Let me understand. So people might feel fear about becoming a minority if you are white in this country. And it's true. We, the new mainstream, has the capacity to change these definitions. Why not? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be that a minority means that you're disenfranchised and disempowered and isolated. No, we're going to have a white minority in this United States in the future. Minority is not going to mean what it's meant in the past. By the way, I should say that minority is a term that I haven't used within my own family, and even as a journalist, unless I've had to. It's not a term that has worked for me, because I've always understood that in this grand scheme of things, I don't want to be thinking of myself as a minority. I don't want my kids to be thinking of themselves as minorities. So I got rid of that term a long time ago.
Sure, I join you in that. Good for you. Interestingly, in this show also, we've got the prospect. I want to go back to the African-American mayor. There was a very interesting comment, we don't want to give it away fully at the end of it, where you actually pressed him up to get his more inner thoughts about where he was actually coming from during all these changes. Right. What was your sense of that? You see, this man had to come to a lot of different personal conclusions very quickly about how to manage or be a mayor of such a huge multicultural pot.
Especially because at first, when he moved there about 50 years ago, he was the outsider. As a black man coming from Pennsylvania, he was the outsider. And the KKK was very upset about him being there in Clarkston. Right. But then he stays in Clarkston, he becomes a part of the new majority there, the African-American majority. Then you have the relocation of the refugees, and he's like, wait a second, I don't like this. That's what inspires him to become a community activist, actually, is to say, we need to stop with this refugee relocation. And then he becomes mayor. And then he realizes that these numbers, again, of refugees, of immigrants, are not going to go away. How do you make this into a win for the town? And there's one part that didn't end up in the show, which we have to say it's really adorable, because, again, humans have the capacity to cross boundaries. Love can sometimes be the reason that we do that. So the mayor, last we heard, had a Vietnamese girlfriend.
Seriously.
So from somebody who was like, foreigners, different, I don't want you here, now changing completely and saying, I understand that this is the future, and I'm falling in love with a Vietnamese refugee.
What a lovely story. Interesting.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some election stuff. Very interesting what's going on, specifically to the Latino vote. It's interesting to note that when 11%, if I have that number correct, of the electorate, so to speak, it wouldn't take a political genius to figure out that if Mr. Obama can do well with the Latino vote, he's going to do well, but if he doesn't, he's not going to do well. Right. Is that an accurate assessment at that point?
I would agree with that. Yeah. I'm not necessarily sure if everyone in the campaign has completely wrapped their arms around that in terms of the Democratic campaign. The latest polls that I saw have Obama at 70-20 in terms of the Latino vote. That bodes very well for the Democratic Party. We're actually doing a half-hour Need to Know special October 19th that is focusing on the Latino vote, and we're going into the central part of Florida, because Florida being a swing state, we're in the swing sector of the swing state, and it's Latino voters that hold the key to the state of Florida. Not Cuban American lifelong Republicans, but Puerto Ricans who have moved from the East Coast down into Central Florida. Some, more tendency of Democratic Party affiliation, but there's a very large spiritual and religious trend within Latino voters right now. So the pro-life issue weighs heavily, immigration weighs heavily, top line, employment. So we'll see what ends up happening. I know that the Romney campaign is putting a lot of attention into this area. But I still think that if I had to generalize about both the Republican and the Democratic Party vis-a-vis Latino voters, it's that they don't quite yet understand the level of complexity of the Latino voter. And all of the reporting that I've been doing this year is basically pointing to that, which is this new mainstream is not simplified. You can't simplify it. You can't put it into a block. And how you're going to reach them is going to entail a lot of effort to understanding how these voters see themselves as Americans. For me, the takeaway is that I see this as, in my good days when I'm really enthusiastic about our society and our country, is that this is going to reinvigorate our democracy. People who are new voters, who just want to go and vote, whereas, and hopefully that will be more prominent than the so many people in our country who just can vote, have the right to vote, and don't vote. We need to get rid of that perspective.
It's interesting. I heard a friend of mine said it's one cycle away from the Latino vote being the absolute make or break for any candidate, any side. And the Republican Party's got to figure it out. The Democratic Party's got to figure it out. If you're going to be independent, you got to figure it out. Nobody can ignore it anymore.
And that's why for Latino, I mean, for all voters across the board, but for Latino voters in particular, if you look at the numbers and the fact that our demographic is growing so fast, you do not want to have a situation where Latino parents or grandparents are saying, I'm not going to vote. I tried last time, didn't work for me, didn't get anything. I'm done. I'm not voting. I'm just done. Because the children or the grandchildren in that home will hear that. And that sets us back in terms of what a democracy is going to be all about, which is getting more and more people engaged in the system. So that's my big push, which is people have got to vote. No matter how upset you may feel or how enthusiastic, but you know, it's difficult to go vote, people don't want to take the time. This is the essence of democracy. So those people who can vote must take their children to witness it. At the same time, I'm very clear that you do not have to be a citizen to be part of a democracy. And you can have an influence in this country. Whether you have a green card or whether you're here without any papers, you can still have an impact in this country. So I would hope that people understand it's about democracy with the vote, if you can, and if you can't vote, to get involved in other ways.
Maria Hinojosa, thank you so much for being here. I have to tell you, Need to Know is a very strong show here in Albuquerque. We love you here, and we can't wait to see that election show you're talking about as